Welcome to the Chasing Brighter podcast.
You're about to go on a journey of self-discovery as we chase a brighter you. Every single week, we will bring you new episodes that will cover everything from lifestyle and tips to more serious conversations about grief, life, and hardships.
Allow this show to be a reminder to always keep chasing a brighter version of you. Let's get into it.
Hi, welcome to today's episode where Kelly and I talk with Kathy Colaiacovo. She is a marketing strategist for private practice and service-based business owners. As president of Pepperit Marketing Services Incorporated and host of Marketing Your Private Practice with Kathy C podcast, she helps clients all over the globe stop wasting time and money by following a simple and streamlined marketing plan that attracts clients by focusing on the big picture and long-term marketing strategies, not just using social media. Kathy lives with her husband Marco in Halifax, Nova Scotia, on Canada's East Coast. She and her husband Marco have been married since 1993 and have 3 boys, Ryan, Marshall, and Alexander, and a rescue dog named Pepper. We talk with Kathy about her life growing up and living all over Canada as a military brat, her journey from being a full-time at-home mom to starting her own successful business, as well as how Kathy's parenting journey started out as being a parent of 3 boys and 1 girl. We hope you enjoy this episode. It was wonderful talking with Kathy. Good morning, Kathy.
Hello, hello.
So excited to have you today. Actually, it's afternoon for you, isn't it?
It is
technically afternoon.
Yeah.
It's afternoon here, so
Yes.
yeah.
I was looking at the bio that you sent us, and I was like, oh my goodness, I've met someone that's moved as much as we have, although we weren't military brats.
Oh, the last half of my moves were because of my husband's work, so not the military.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And this is
Yeah.
the longest I've ever lived anywhere, and we've been here 15 years.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah, it's year
And
16 for us.
Yeah. Cal, how long have you been in Chicago?
19 years.
19 years. I used to have been there a minute. Yeah, we were following my husband's education,
Right.
like with school and whatnot, and moving all the time. And when we bought this house, I was like, I'm dying here. Like, I'm done.
I'm not.
Well,
I want
no.
to see somewhere else. Just don't know when.
I think we're done. And we were done because that last move was probably the hardest on our kids. And I actually remember when we sat them down and told them, and in fairness to them, we moved at the end of August, bought our new house on October 19th, and told them at Christmas we were moving again.
Oh,
Wow.
yeah.
So it was a job that did not work out well for my husband. So he found another one, which meant another move. And the moment when we told them our youngest, Alex, had made some really good friends for the first time. He was in grade 2. And I remember him actually kicking and punching and yelling. So upset. And I was like, this is not happening again.
Yeah, it's tough. That's what I had told my husband. I was like, I don't want to move once the kids start school.
Yeah.
Because I remember that. Kelly and I remember that. And
We
we've
moved a
talked
fair
on
amount.
we've
when we
talked on
were
the
at school
podcast
age.
about ultimately looking back, it's made us flexible people who can make friends easily. But at the
Yep.
time, it
It was
wasn't
hard. It was
fun.
hard. It was
Yeah.
hard. Yeah. And I remember when we got here, they finished out the year at a French immersion school because they were in that. And then in September, like the school's literally a hop, skip, and a jump from here for English. But if they'd stayed in French, they would have had to get on the bus at 7:30 to go a 10-minute ride, but it was going to take them 50 minutes because they have to pick up
Yeah.
kids. So we said, no, we're going to stop that one and put them in the school behind us. So grade 3, Alex started and had been at one school for primary and one school for part of 2 schools for part of 2. And this was the 4th school and going in grade 3. And I remember being at the door the first day of school and all the moms are there and stuff. And my kid was bawling and crying and all upset. And this mother came over to me and said, little bit old to be crying on the first day of school, don't you think? And the mama bear in me looked at her and said, in fairness, it's grade 3 and this is his 4th school. And
Yeah.
she walked away. She didn't know what to say to that.
Yeah. And you guys did not become best friends.
Funny enough, I don't know who she was, but I think later on in life we were not. I think we knew each other. I do think I know who she was if I remember correctly, and yeah,
I
we
know,
didn't click.
think about the intent sometimes with which we speak. It's like that. We think about that. What were we trying to spread there?
Yeah, exactly. There was no purpose to the
Right.
comment other than
100%.
harm
Yeah,
and judgment.
totally.
Yeah.
So let's take a step back though. Okay, so you are from Canada. You
Yes.
live in Halifax. Even when you're talking about school, so how many kids do you have? And then also, you said grade 3, where we would say 3rd grade. So do you have kindergarten? Like, even that kind of stuff I'm curious
Not
about.
exactly, but
Okay.
yes. So, yes, I am married and we have 3 kids. They are now 28, 25, and almost 24. And here in Nova Scotia, they actually call it's very different. Most of Canada calls it kindergarten, but in Nova Scotia, we call it grade primary.
Hmm.
But we do. I never thought about that. We do say we're in grade 1, 2, and 3. I think that's the common way of how we say it, Kelly.
We would say that in some ways, but
Yeah.
like we say, like I have a
Right.
3rd grade or a 4th
Yeah.
grade.
And the other thing that is different is we don't do the sophomore and the other words that you guys all talk about.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We're just either they're in grade 10, 11, or 12, right?
Yeah.
So they might say senior for high school, and you go to senior high school, junior high school, and elementary school.
Okay. And then what about college then? What do you say?
So
University?
typically it's university here. Yeah. Our colleges are typically called university. There are community colleges and there are some as colleges, but I know in the States, most people define you go to college, we
We
go to
just say college,
university.
yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. So it is a little different here.
Yeah.
Cool.
And for you, what was your journey? So do you have siblings?
Yeah, I have one younger sister, and our dad was in the military. And so we were both born in Alberta, so more on the west coast of Canada. And that's where my mom's family is from. And then throughout the military life, we moved to Prince Edward Island and Ontario and back to Prince Edward Island and back to Ontario. And at that point, I was going in grade 10, and my parents had always made a deal that once we hit high school, my dad was going to retire so that we didn't have to move once we are in the high school aspect of life.
Yeah.
So we were pretty much here in Nova Scotia at that point. And my dad's family has been in Nova Scotia since the 1750s. So he's from
Wow.
here.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Whereas my mom's family immigrated from Wales in 1929 so that my grandfather could get out of the mining business. And so they're actually a true pioneer story. They took a boat with 4 kids and 2 trunks, landed in Quebec or in Montreal, and took a train out to Alberta where they got parceled out CPR, Canadian Pacific Railway farmland to build the West.
Yeah.
That's
So,
Yeah.
awesome.
yeah,
That's
super
great that
cool.
you know that history too. I think a lot of people don't know their history.
It's my mom's family was really good on telling stories, and we have a book about an inch and a half thick of all the family stories. So we have a lot of people that respect that. But funny thing was, my grandfather wasn't great, I don't think, at farming, and he became a postal carrier. And then ultimately, he was mayor of the town, which is cool.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
No, that is cool. I
Yeah.
read an article a few years ago that said children who know like their family history have higher self-esteem, higher instances of completing high school and have better quality life,
Oh, that's
which I think is
interesting.
fascinating. It is interesting,
Yeah.
but we too come from a family that shares our genealogy and we can
Yeah.
track our history.
It makes you I think it makes you proud of where you came from. It's
It
kind of an
does.
interesting story. Everyone
Yeah.
has an interesting story in that way,
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. And it's funny because it's very different from Western Canada to where we are because people have been in Nova Scotia for so long.
Mhm.
When we were born out west, I always remember my mom telling the story in the hospital, they had you fill out a paper for the babies of the heritage. So where did they come from? So she wrote down Welsh and Canadian, and they didn't know what to do with the Canadian part. And they're Canadian. He's Canadian. You can't be Canadian, is what they said. And his family's been here since the 1750s. But out west, where they didn't have that long of a history as much as we do over here on the East Coast. So it's a funny story. She's like, no,
Yeah.
they are Canadian.
We noticed I think we noticed that in the US, Jess, I don't know about you, but us even being from Kansas, where, like, I live in Chicago now, I feel like most of the people I know who are from Chicago, they're, like, maybe 2nd generation. There's not the pizza pie of their
Yeah,
heritage is like a 50-50 kind of a thing, where
right.
I feel like the further west you go, even the US and us being from Kansas, it is a melting pot. Like, our
Yeah,
relatives are we don't even know where some of them were
yeah,
from in Europe because it's just a hodgepodge of stuff, so
yeah,
Yeah, Vegas is incredibly transient,
yeah.
but I do have some friends who are born and raised here, but for the most part, it's very transient over here where I'm at. But I'd love to hear a little bit about Kathy, just maybe we'll start present day and just hop all over the place. But I would love for our listeners to hear about your podcast and your business.
Sure. So I always say I have a funny story. So I started my business 16 years ago after someone who I knew a little bit on a volunteer committee said, and we were moving. So my husband and I were doing this move that I had talked about where we told the kids that it was just a bad scene when we finally told them we had to leave again and move. And she said to me, there's an article in the paper and it's about this woman. She's a virtual assistant. She has her own business. I think you would be really good at it and you should start this business. And she followed up with, because she worked for a career counseling place. She said, because you're moving, you qualify for unemployment because you have to leave your job because your husband's moving and you're moving provinces. So she said, you would qualify for this self employment benefits program. So I think you should check it all out. You get there and start a business. So I did a lot of research and I checked it all out. And I did look into the program. And that July, I got into the program and started my business. And back then, I was a virtual assistant. So that's how I started off. Probably within 2 years, I had a full practice. So I was full of clients and doing well and hiring. And then fast forward to 2014, I had 14 subcontractor VAs working with me
wow.
to help manage about 35 to 40 ongoing clients at any given time. And the specialty support that we had was social media marketing. For whatever reason, marketing always came very easy to me.
Hmm.
And it was something I had started in university, but I actually am a university dropout due to social anxiety. So I had too many panic attacks and just anxiety attacks with people staring at me in the halls or maybe judging me, things that really weren't happening, but were paralyzing for me. So I'd quit university and I had gone to some training as a bank teller and worked for the bank for 13 years. After my third kid was born, I quit the bank, did volunteer work full time for about 7 years, ran into this person when we were moving around. And I think it was about 8 years after I left my bank job that I started the business. And in 2015, with all the team and the clients and the pressure and not having been able to successfully find a good project manager like a mini me, it was stressful. It was hard and it was a lot of work. So I decided to make a shift and kind of started letting clients go and letting team members go till I got to a place where I was comfortable with the amount of clients I had, what I was doing. And then I started taking the training programs. I had started virtual training programs for social media back in 2012. And I took that to a new level and created what a lot of people will call a signature program.
Mhm.
Started as something different, but it's evolved into the Thrive Marketing Academy. And I focus on marketing strategies for private practice owners like you, Jessica,
Yeah.
and therapists, clinicians, dietitians. And I teach them how to do their marketing so that they're understanding the foundations of marketing, have a good message, can create content, and use a system so that the marketing is not taking all of their time and is actually helping them get clients and growing the business. So
Yeah.
I do more of a focus on the training program in the academy now than I do working with clients, but I still have a handful of clients that we do their ongoing support for. So I still have 4 VAs that work for me. And But I'm pretty particular about that, and then I'll work one-on-one with some people that if the year-long academy program is too long for them and they wanna go faster and do things more custom, then I work with them one-on-one. And
Do you still have
yeah,
contact with the woman who told you you should
but
Laid
trust
out your
it's
career
funny.
path for you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I know, I always say I actually met her 2 years ago on the waterfront in Halifax. We were out walking the dog, and she was there with her family. And every so often, I'll see her husband post stuff on Facebook. She's not really on Facebook, but he is, and I'll give him updates or whatever. Because that basketball association was actually my first client. They hired me to do their website and keep that up, and they were a client of mine for years. But yeah, I have talked to her, and I have definitely told her that one honestly, it was a 30-second comment to
Yeah.
me that shifted my entire life.
Wow.
Yeah,
And you were at a spot where you were open to hearing it,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I did spend 4 months doing research, I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
well, that's what I was going to ask though too, Kathy, is that what advice do you have? You talk about okay, so you didn't you didn't finish university for various reasons and depending on how far you got, but how did you like getting into the marketing piece without having a quote unquote marketing degree, right?
yeah,
What advice do you have for people that like I think that's the hardest part. Sorry, I ask really long questions. It's why I'm
that's
not on
okay.
a TV journalist person. Anchor woman, yes. I also don't have the helmet hair yet. But when I think about I have a marketing degree and I do this, but realistically nowadays everyone goes to college, you don't even end up doing what you're doing. So
Yep.
with that being said, like you lean into this kind of expertise. What mindset did you have to do that?
I didn't think I had one at the time, to be honest. So in those 7 years where I volunteered, and so I was on what we call here the home and school, you all call it the PTA down there.
Okay. Okay.
And so I started out I remember when Ryan started in grade primary, so kindergarten, and I joined the homeschool. I wanted to participate. I was always I guess I wasn't really active until then, but I joined in. And I remember helping with the spring fair, and the planning committee was like, "Okay, everybody, so we're gonna be doing the spring fair. It'll be the same as last year, and we're gonna do all the same things that we didn't." I'm like, "Hello, I wasn't there last year. What are you talking about?" And then they had me I started helping with it and doing I didn't know I was doing marketing, but I was doing marketing,
Yeah.
and I helped them actually get more sales at the spring fair and raise more money than they had because they did a lot of communication, I called it, but it was marketing, in that at one point, somebody said, "People show up and they've always run out of money." I'm like, "Okay, the posters are gonna say the prices of everything so people know how much money to bring." Different things like that, and I didn't realize I was doing marketing at all. I
It
had
came
no
natural to
clue.
you, it sounds like, huh?
Yeah, and I did do my degree that I was focused on when I was in university was actually marketing,
Okay.
but truly I wanted to be an architect all my life. I don't know why I went into the marketing, but it just came natural. We moved another time with the kids and they wanted to play baseball. And everybody was playing soccer, and so I went in to help with the baseball board, and they were talking about how they were gonna get more registrations because we were living in my dad's hometown, which had been a big baseball town, and they just couldn't get kids to play because everybody was into the soccer. And so then they were telling me how they were gonna get registrations, and so they were gonna send I'm not gonna say a name, but this gentleman who was pretty big in baseball in the town, and we're talking a town of n 9, 10,000. They sent him to the schools at recess to show the kids what a baseball bat was and stuff, and that's how they were gonna get registrations. I'm like, "Folks, this is not gonna work. We're gonna make up a little flyer. We're gonna find out how many kids are in every class in all of the schools." So we wrote up the flyer, we cut it up, I counted them for class. I got the classroom sizes and put them into packets of how many kids were in every classroom. Anyhow, I ended up becoming, within a year, the president of the Minor Baseball Association. And a year after that, I got an award from Sport Nova Scotia for they call
Wow.
it for bringing baseball back to Yarmouth
Oh,
because
that's amazing.
we tripled the registration of baseball players in 2 years by 3 in tripled. So, I
Wow.
did marketing, Kelly, but I didn't know I was doing marketing. Like, my second client ever came from a Twitter post. Like, I think it's just one of those things that my creative brain knows what to do and can think about these things in a different way. Like, you're never gonna get baseball players to sign up when you're talking to the kids. It's the parents
Yeah,
who are gonna put them in and pay the
right.
money. Send home a
Yeah,
flyer, tell them what it's about.
right.
And I think it's just that's how my brain is wired. And then I remember talking to somebody years later, and she's, "Kathy, you don't remember the stuff you did in high school." I always thought shy, didn't do much, and by grade 12, I was doing more. I was on, like, the newspaper. I was an editor of the paper and helping with the awards, and she's like, "Do you even remember how you, like, called the radio stations and were trying to get the principal on point because he took out the Ms. magazine because it had a cover of some woman in a bathing suit and he wouldn't let it go in the library?" Apparently, I had, like, a whole charge of and protesting going on. I don't remember.
Yeah.
It's
So it's
so it
natural, I
is
think.
what's fascinating about that, Kathy, is I feel like we don't especially, like, now we are where we are in life, where it was like, what was I like? And
Yeah,
now having kids, right, who are young adults, and going through life, and I don't remember my
yeah.
personality, right,
No.
back then. I wish I would have kept I have a diary that I had a little bit of a diary, and I look
Yeah,
back through it, and I was like, "Oh my gosh," like, you get where I was worried about the most trivial things,
yeah,
but I feel like I'm the same person, but I'm not
yeah,
in some way, right?
yeah,
It's weird.
yeah. So it was there, like, I was always doing it, but I didn't
Yeah.
finish my formal training, and frankly, the fact that I didn't finish university hung as a really heavy weight on my shoulders of shame for many years.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
because I thought I wasn't worthy of sharing what I knew. I've
Mm.
kicked that to the can and the curb now. A lot of people think that you can't do as much or be as successful without a degree. I fully disagree. I think life and lived experiences can certainly teach you a lot, but I also think people have these innate talents and gifts that sometimes need to be pulled out. And even if you have them, you may not recognize them. And in
Yeah, I
my
think
case, somebody else recognized it. And thank God I listened to her because I did a tally once. Last year, I hit a $2 million level of revenue gross in my business over
wow,
time.
congratulations.
Yeah. 57 years I would have had to work at the bank at the salary I left at in 2000
Yeah.
to make the same amount of money. Now it's different. It's not revenue in a business is a different thing. I had
Sure, sure.
subcontractors, I'm paying them out, but I'm still proud of that.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I just think if I hadn't listened to her confidence in me, where would I be now? I just my life would have been
Yeah.
so different.
Well, and we've been talking about imposter syndrome a little bit, but also I truly believe, and I know we've talked on this podcast, but just that entrepreneurship is really a way for women to be able to accumulate wealth and
Mhm.
come into their own financially. And I know too, you've talked a little bit about some of your decisions were based on the needs of your family.
Yep.
So
Yep.
you got a business, it grew really fast, and then you realized you're working so much. I'm assuming then, right, that's pulling away
Yep.
from the
Yeah.
family.
Yeah.
And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I thought we've had a conversation about this before, but that you slowed things down when your kids were teenagers.
Yep. Yeah. My youngest was 14, 15 at the time and going through a really rough time in life that didn't evolve or change for a couple years after that. And yeah, I was always there. After the third baby was born, I stayed home. I worked part time for a bit and then we moved houses and had to get a babysitter because I didn't have what I had set up before, and that didn't work out. Like, that was a nightmare. So I quit my job and started babysitting. So I was always around, and I was around for them as little kids, but I sometimes feel like being around when they're 12 to 16, 17, 18. I feel like me being around then was almost more important than when they were younger.
I think
So,
that
yeah.
they're calling it something, and I wish there was a reel that came up on
Yeah.
Instagram, and they were saying it was an interview, and then they had a little blip about women or parents are choosing to pull back or stay home when their kids are
Yep.
teenagers. And I find that I find that fascinating because I
Yep.
agree. Kelly and I are doing something very similar. Our
Yeah.
kids are those ages.
Yeah. And I always remember Marshall, our middle child, played junior high hockey. The games were at 3:30 in the afternoon,
Yeah.
right?
That's the one thing I'm finding
Yeah.
is I think it's more demanding shuttling them around as they get especially playing sports.
Yeah.
And I have friends who are like, they have a tournament in Indianapolis and the game's at 4 o'clock on a Thursday in the middle
Yeah.
of the summer. And you're like, you got to drive
Yeah.
down there and get a hotel and all the things. And it's very demanding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sports is so much more competitive now than it was also when we
Yes.
were
Yeah.
kids. And so parents have to end up making a lot of kind of sacrifices
Yeah.
to make it work. And
And
also
and for
just
me, all I did was I blocked in time on the calendar and I didn't do work then, and I
Yeah.
might have worked later on, but I was
yeah.
sure the envy of some people because it wasn't a big deal for me to pick them up, and I usually took a few others.
Well, and I
Yeah,
think
that's great.
you
Yeah.
can carpool, but what my husband and I talk about, especially those tween and teen years, that's your one-on-one time
Yeah.
with your kids. Like they're locked in
Yeah.
a car with you. So
I
that's
love
nice.
car conversations.
Yeah, we have the best talks at that
Yeah.
time. So I'm
Yeah.
grateful that the same I'm able to
Yeah.
block out my schedule and be available as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. And I did a when Alex was in grade 7, 8, 9, I was a manager of a team he was on for a program called Destination Imagination, which is a STEM community service-based sport. I don't know what to call it. It's always we always have a hard time describing it. I had a team, but they competed with their minds and their creativity, not
Oh, neat.
their sport ability. It's an
Yeah.
awesome program if you've ever heard of it, but I managed this team for 3 years. So they came to my house after school to practice and work on things because it's a year long and there's competitions. And we actually went to the global finals twice in Knoxville, Tennessee. And the last time we went, they came in 8th in the world in their competition.
Wow.
That is
Um,
cool.
and it was an awesome time. And if I had a job, like a regular job back at the bank, would never have been able to do all that stuff. So I really treasure that time that I was able to do things. But at the same time, you feel like you worked a lot. So then you have that mom guilt that you weren't a great mom either. So how you balance that is still hard.
Yeah.
There's no perfect balance,
No,
I feel
no,
for sure.
no.
So having 3 kids, how for us, I think just trying to make sure we help our kids lean into like their passions and things
Yeah,
they love. How did you balance it with those your 3, especially because they're relatively close in age?
yeah, yeah. It was hard, it was challenging sometimes, and when we had a lot of the issues between 2010 and 2016 with Alex, sometimes I feel the other 2 may have had the short end of the stick sometimes, but it is what it is, and I look at where we're at now and how we got to where we are, and they're all great kids. They're very respectful, they're very responsible, they are doing the things that they wanna do and loving what they're doing, and anytime we get feedback on them from people, like from jobs or work or volunteer things, it's like, such a great kid." So, that kind of gives you that validation that you might have
Yeah, it's
done a
like the
good
pat
job.
on the back.
Yeah,
When you
exactly.
said,
Yeah.
yeah, I'd like to get into Alex's journey a little bit.
Yeah,
Now you have shared, right? You began your parenting journey with 2 boys and a girl.
I
And
did.
so tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, we have 3 kids. Ryan's the oldest, Marshall's the middle one, and Alex or Xander or Alex or Alexander, we call him, is our youngest. And when Alex was born, her name was actually Olivia at the time. And that was the way it was. We had 2 boys and a girl, and There was a time in and this is where so I'll get confusing with, pronouns here. So I typically refer to Alex now as he when I talk about the
Mhm.
old days, but in the old days, we had Olivia. And in 2010, something changed, and there was mood and anger and all sorts of different challenges, and so we began a journey for about 6 years of psychologists and psychiatrists and lots of challenges, lots of ups and downs, confusion on our part, confusion on his part. He didn't go out a whole lot, like, he was on this team that I managed in grade 7, 8, and 9, but that was a challenge in itself sometimes. I think it was a saving force of friends as well, because I don't know if he would have done much outside of that. In 2014 and 2015, those 2 summers, I think he left his bedroom once,
Wow.
maybe in the 2
And you weren't
summers.
aware of what was happening.
We didn't know what was going on. We were
Yeah.
working with psychologists and everybody and behavior and mood, and I don't think he knew what was going on. And it was stressful on the family. It was hard for everybody. There was a lot of mood swings, a lot of anger, and the yelling in the house. And in fairness, I think the other 2, they didn't bring a lot of friends around because you didn't know what was going to happen or when things would explode and what was going on. And it was just for us, it was a lot of seeking answers and wondering why. Like, why is this happening? There's no parenting book that tells you your life might be miserable for a while and you won't know what's going on, or, and you don't know if there's an end to it or anything like that. And that was just the way it was. And at one point, after a doctor's appointment, we were called back by the doctor to come in, and she informed us that he seriously contemplated suicide. This room I'm in right now was his bedroom, and that closet was going to be part of that plan.
Wow.
Yeah. And our dog, who we no longer have with us, Lola, walked into the room and apparently changed the what was going to
Plan.
happen.
Yeah.
The plan.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so at that point,
But Alex had said this to the physician.
but not us.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that had happened months earlier. And at this point, we still didn't really know what was going on. He had long hair and wore sweatpants and sweatshirts. And I always described it as hiding himself. He just didn't want to be part of anything. And it was just, as a parent, you don't know what to do because you just want to make your kid happy and have them
Yeah.
get out and live life and have fun and be with friends. And when that doesn't happen, you're like, what am I doing? What's going on? And you're looking for those answers. And so after that phone call from the doctor that day, Marco and I literally tag teamed that kid for 2 years.
Yeah.
And unless he was at school, he was never alone. He was never left home alone in this house, which when you're worried about that, I always say all parenting rules change when that's a big fear that you
Mm.
have. And again, you feel bad because I feel like the other 2 had different sets of rules and had to accommodate because of all the crap, I call it, going on. And it is what it is. And as parents, you just try to get through it. We have great families and they're trying to help. And then finally, one day, I was dropping Alex off at school and we were going to meet the psychologist, Marco and I, for our family part of the meetings. He got out of the car and he paused for a second. I thought, oh, am I going to get a goodbye? Because I usually just got out and slammed the door. And he got out and he looked back in the car and he said, are you going to see Meredith? It was always anger. And Meredith was the psychologist. And I said, yeah. And he goes, great. Here's the thing. I'm transgender. I'm a guy. The school all knows it. My friends all know it. My name's Xander now. And you can go to Meredith and talk with her and deal with that shit. And he slammed the door and left. At which point I broke down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I
a
remember,
lot.
yeah, it was a lot. And I remember meeting Marco at Starbucks, and because we were going to have a coffee date first, because we were still in the nobody's left alone phase, right? in school, so we're going to have a coffee date. And I got there and I was meeting him in his car and I was just a mess. And we went there and I was really upset. When I look back, I was mostly upset because I felt like all these people knew
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's how
and
I
we
would
had
feel. Yeah.
and we had been struggling to figure out what the hell was
Yeah.
happening with our lives. And you all knew and didn't tell us. And
I mean,
that's a
you're with
big,
him every minute and
yeah,
all of this stuff.
yeah,
And
yeah,
to have this whole world that got built
right,
where you
right,
felt like you knew you were
right,
trying to, right, to keep your pulse on the
yeah.
situation.
And right now in Canada, there's 2 provinces, New Brunswick and Saskatchewan, that have put in bills that if a child like Alex, under the age of 16, which he was at that point, wants to go by a different name or pronoun at school, they have to tell the parents. They're not allowed to do it, which is bullshit. I'm sorry. I didn't ask if we can swear, but
That's
No,
I
okay.
don't
no,
really
No,
it's
we
know.
fine.
can. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a mom
Here's
podcast.
It is. And here's why I say this. If he had been forced to tell us when he was on this discovery process and really didn't know what was going on, he honestly
Mm.
probably would not be alive today. And that's what
Oh.
happens with kids. If
Yeah.
they don't want to tell, and I always look back like, what was the pause for, right? Like he paused when he opened the door. And I'm like, I realized really soon afterwards, he was trying to get up the courage to say something
Mhm.
he'd probably been trying to say for a while. And the only way he could do it was say it as fast as he could, slam the door, and go because it's hard. Kids who come out to parents, trans kids, gay kids, lesbian, doesn't matter what, telling their parents is the scariest thing in the world. Telling a teacher is not so scary. Telling a friend is not so scary. Telling your parents, knowing what the world is like, knowing that you don't know until after you've told them if you're still going to have a family, if you're still going to have a home, if you're going to have the life you just had, but there's one small change that really is not a big change. And people just need to suck it up and keep loving their kids. And that is
Wow.
what people need to understand. And these laws that they're trying and rules
Right.
that they're trying to put in are ridiculous because all it's going to do is take statistics that are already scary enough
Yeah.
with trans kids and make them higher.
Like you said,
Because if
Alex had to
he'd
do
been
it
had
on
to
his own
force, he
time. He had to
did.
do it on his
They,
own time. And
yeah,
also, I know for my daughter, there is some real, what she's told me about friends at school, some real fears of physical abuse, a lot of
yep,
scary stuff happening at
yep,
home. And so school is a safe zone where they can test out, they can test that
yep.
out there.
And so I'll defend to my dying day that these kids need to be let alone and come to their own terms and come to their own terms and when they tell their family, because telling their family is the scariest thing to do. And I will tell you, Alex has friends who no longer have homes and families to go to
Yeah.
Wow.
because when they came out, they're trans. And
Yeah,
there are
it's
Wow.
so
real.
many people in the world
Yes.
in that situation, right?
Mm.
Like
Yeah.
I remember him saying they had a gender neutral washroom at the school, at the high school he was at. And one mom of a kid found out what this key was for and threw it in the lake. What does that even accomplish? And so once I got through that literally at that psychologist's office, at that meeting, I remember at one point, then Marco and I looked at each other and we're like, holy shit, this is it.
Yeah.
This is the why we've been looking for.
Well, and
It's
it's
not a
like
big
you've been on alert 24/7 for 2 freaking years
Yep.
trying to keep him alive.
And
Oh,
you're
okay.
trying to figure out like what is the
Yep.
thing,
You're
right?
like,
And you're
that's what
trying
it
to
is? Okay, I
yeah.
just want my child to thrive. Okay.
Yeah. There are cancers.
Yeah.
There are
Yeah.
things that take kids from this life way too early. Being transgender
Yeah.
should not do that.
My
And
favorite
yeah,
reel on Instagram is the mom. Have you seen that? And she was like, I'm a Christian woman, and my son came out to me and told me today that he's trans. You know what we did? We went and got him a haircut.
yep,
And she was like, you know what? Kids need love. You're the
yep,
parent and you need to love them. And it was just so
yep,
like simple and beautiful. Like you're saying, you're like, okay,
yep.
we're going to continue to love our child.
And I'll tell you, that was Friday, May 13th, 2016. And his birthday was May 30th, his 16th birthday. I realized too, part of why he was telling us then was because he wanted a beginner's, but he did not want to get a beginner's as Olivia. By the time he went to get his driver's license a couple weeks later, we had a new birth certificate with a new name on it.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And it was such a change. Like it was once the acceptance was there, which was immediate because we were literally like, holy crap, this is the why. Great. Let's move on and live now. No big deal,
Yeah.
which I know is not a gift that every transgender, gay, lesbian, anyone in the LGBTQ community that comes out to family, it's not something that happens for everybody. And it's probably happens less than more. And so for us, we just moved on. But I do remember being at a parent support group that summer. And this one mom was talking and she said, I don't understand you. She said, why are you so okay with this? She said, you've changed his name. We went out, we had a shopping trip, got new clothes and stuff. And I got an entire other story and a blog I wrote about that if you want to put a reference to it, because
Yes, we
Yeah.
will.
treatment we got from the woman in that store that day, I ended up writing a letter to the president of the company, which is a Canadian jean store, and got a phone call back from her on it. And then I had an experience a year later when we went shopping again. Anyhow, it's a long story, but I do have a blog I can reference for you. But a lot of people, it's like that stuff. This woman said to me, I don't understand. How can you be like this? And so I said to her, did your son have any, did he just tell you one day that he was a she, or was there build up to it? Was there challenges or anything? And it was a surprise. It was like there was nothing. And all of a sudden, one day, and I said, there's your difference. Because she said, I'm in therapy now. Like, I need help. And I said, for us, this was the answer to 6 years of what we often refer to as mental health hell,
Yeah.
because we did not know what was going on. We didn't understand anything. We couldn't figure it out. We didn't know why the self harm. We didn't know why the hatred, the hiding. And for us, this was the answer. And it was no big deal because honestly, the light in his eyes came back almost immediately,
Wow.
Yeah.
almost immediately.
And what torture for him too, because that probably wasn't for him, again, you're going through,
Yeah.
what is a prepubescent
Yep.
mind is going
Yep.
through all these changes.
Yep.
And trying to sort out the why and the
Yeah.
what must have been
And it was
incredibly
his,
difficult.
yeah, and it was his own journey. I don't think really until he got near the end that he even knew what it was. I just
Yeah.
don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kelly, you asked me something earlier, like how did you know about the marketing, or how did,
Yeah.
and it's funny, when I was pregnant with all my kids, I had what I called theme dreams. And I knew about these dreams and I had them all the time and I've told the story all the time, but probably in about 2019 or 20, several years after Alex came out, I was telling a friend of mine these stories and all of a sudden I went, oh my, I just had this realization of what story I'd been telling for years. So my oldest son, I had themed dreams around spiders and bugs and critters, and I would feel them in my bed. And I remember seeing a tarantula mobile hanging above. I can still see them vividly. With my second one, okay, these ones were really bad. I was trying to harm my husband. And it wasn't great, but I kept having these dreams, right? With third child, with Alex, and I didn't understand what this might have meant. And I think I am a believer in some signs. I kept having dreams constantly. We lived at the top of his parents' house up in the top part of their house when I was pregnant with my third one. And I kept having these dreams that I had a C-section in the house, that Marco had done it himself with a knife from the kitchen in his mom's sink, and he delivered the baby, and he did the operation or whatever. But in every dream that I had about that in the themes, I delivered the babies, there was always 2, and it was always a boy and a girl, and I
Mm.
delivered them on twin bed. And when I was telling the
Mm.
story later on in life, I was like, "Oh, I never thought about the significance of what those dreams
Yeah.
might have meant."
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
Is that amazing?
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel like now, especially coming with that realization that you are able to tap into yourself and to listen to that more?
I try to. I'm not always good at listening to anybody, let alone myself.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I do tend to believe that what our instincts are and our first thoughts are the things that we always should go with or
Yeah.
think about.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do. But yeah, like I feel the way the life we've had since then has been very different. And like I talked to you about 2 years in his room and didn't come out. Immediately, he became an advocate for other people like you wouldn't believe. He
Wow.
joined a board, a youth board for the Youth Project who support LGBTQ kids. He went to a transgender camp that summer. He started helping out. He joined Junior Achievement and went through their program. He spoke at a dinner, a fundraising dinner in front of 200 people. Then with Junior Achievement, he
Wow.
spoke to a group of 1,000 people to introduce his mentor from the program. And I realized how much of a change it was and what he was doing. Like he's done workshops for teachers on Professional Development Day and done help with the Nova Scotia Department of Education to help with some what they can do in their curriculum to help trans kids and lots of stuff. And he's impacted so many people. But the day that and it wasn't soon after, I'll bet you it was that between May and June that year that he came out, or in the fall, he called me and he said called me at home in the middle of the day and he said, "I talked to the school board maintenance department manager today." I'm like, "What?" Eh, the kid who didn't leave his room, and he goes, "Yeah, the locks on the gender neutral bathroom were broken, and the teachers and the principal were trying to get it fixed, and nobody was fixing it. So I called up and I asked to speak to the manager, and I told them why it was important. Anyhow, they're coming tomorrow and they're going to fix it."
Oh my gosh.
A kid who didn't
Yeah.
talk to anybody or didn't want to get out there. And so when I talk to groups about our journey and stuff, I talk about love and acceptance. And those are 2 things that cost nobody anything to give to other people. But in particular, when you give them to transgender folks or anyone coming out or anyone in front of you with a difference, an ability, an age, a language, a culture, you have no idea what will happen when you offer that gift of love and acceptance. And for us and our entire family that came back and I sent a letter out. It was his birthday and I had to go on Facebook and I'm a Facebook person. It was like, I had to say it's my kid's 16th birthday. And so I had a talk with Alex and I said, "Am I allowed to talk to our family and maybe send a letter?" I'd read a book that had talked about a letter a woman had sent to her family before they came to a wedding to explain who was coming to the wedding. And I loved the idea. And he was like, "Sure, as long as I don't have to write the letter."
Yeah.
And I did, and I sent it out. I usually send 70 or so Christmas cards out, and I sent that letter to our family and friends. And I sent it on a Wednesday, and Alex left for transgender camp on Friday. And I sent him to the camp with 13 pages front and back with copy and pasted responses from the letter. And it was all positive.
Oh,
And I
that's
said, maybe you should share these with some other kids at the camp and just so that they know there's hope out there. But all of that, everything that he's done and changed and the people he's now affected and the people that they may have affected, like it's just that constant cycle of the pay it forward. And all we ever had to do was say, okay, your name's Alexander. Xander, some people call you Alex. We're okay with
Yeah.
that. You're
Yeah.
still our kid. You're still our child. We love you. We still just want you to be happy and healthy and live out life doing what you want to do. Let's move. Let's go on.
Yeah.
And when you can do that and offer that to anybody who's different from you, you have no idea what circle you might be setting in motion and changes. And for us, it was phenomenal. whereas he could have been a statistic instead.
Absolutely, and I think that things are shifting as well, but I know Dr. Lulu talked about this, but I just saw a guy, this really fascinating to me. He said when people say, "Oh, I'm a girl mom, I'm a boy mom," and so he posted it was like a joke, and he was like, "I'm a girl dad, so I do this. I'm a girl dad, so I do this," and then he said he goes, "You're a dad."
Mhm.
And he goes, "Think about when you have to say, 'I'm a girl dad, I'm a boy dad.' What are you trying to convey?"
Yeah.
And I think that's why it annoys me because 'cause I'm like, "What does that mean?"
Yeah.
Okay, you know what I mean? And maybe just because 'cause I'm a little more in that world as a mental health therapist, but I've just I try to just say, like, my kids, the oldest, the youngest, whatever, and I know out of respect for my oldest, she does identify as a female and a girl, she is my daughter.
Yeah.
But I just think sometimes I think we go overboard with that, and I saw boys will be boys, boy mom,
Right.
girl mom, all of those things, and then the message we might be giving our children who might be having some internal
Yeah.
struggle isn't helpful either, and again, what are we even saying?
Yeah.
What does it even mean?
Gender reveal parties. I hate them.
Yeah.
And it was funny. I didn't know how much until a friend of mine said, "I've got my first invite to a gender reveal party." What? And she was all excited, and I felt really bad because it
She
was
just
not
wanted
the
a
best
cake.
answer, right? Good thing she was a good friend. Anyhow, she's, "What do you think I bring as a gift?" And I was like, smart ass mom. I was like, "How about a sign that whatever that is today may not be what it is in 15 years?" And she's, "Oh, I never thought about it like that."
Mm.
It is, like, there's a lot of messages we put out there that we don't realize that we're putting out there by saying simple things. I work with a lot of dietitians who are in the eating disorder space, and they believe more in health at every size and no fad diets and all that kind of stuff. And I'll tell you, one of the phrases that people say to people all the time that I have an entirely different take on now is, "Oh my God, you look great. Have you lost weight?" Hidden words that
Yeah.
come behind that is you didn't look as great before because you were heavier,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
100 it's totally the same thing. That's what
It's
I
this,
tell
yep,
my kids. I'm like, "We don't need to be talking about people's bodies."
no,
Like, you
no.
don't need to tell people
Yeah,
anything. We
exactly.
need to
Yeah,
be doing
yeah.
that.
But it is, like, sometimes we don't realize what
Think
we're
about yeah.
saying with some of
Yeah.
the because it's tradition, it's what we've always done, and it's the way things are, but it's not always how it should go or be in the future.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just putting a little thought behind it.
Yeah,
And I think, again, this is like our generation and trying to, the people who came before us,
yeah,
they grew up with that. And that was a very common thing. And
yeah,
it's trying to break that and
yeah,
trying to, doesn't matter. Your kids like certain things and don't like other things. And really think about it because we
yeah,
grew up with the pink and the blue.
yeah,
And so we've raised our kids for the most part, right? Not to worry about color. Wear
yeah,
whatever you want, do
yeah,
whatever you want, and really
exactly.
trying to convey that going forward. But it is hard, right? Because that well worn path is like what we
Yeah,
grew up in some way too.
yeah, yep.
So this is beautiful. And we
We're
are
all over the
grateful
place.
for you sharing this story
But
with
we're
us.
women and we're complicated,
I
and you're a
know.
business
Yes.
owner and a
And
mother
guess what?
and an
Life is messy
advocate.
for all of us,
Yeah.
right?
It
Life is
is.
messy.
It is.
And even what's amazing is what you guys have gone through and come out of it too.
Mhm.
And what advice do you have for other parents who are going through a very difficult time like this with their child? It's how do you keep going when you're in that?
It's hard, I'll be honest. I remember one day buying a book and I told the therapist I bought a book called Walking on Eggshells. She's, "Don't read that. That's not what's happening with you." And I'm like, "But it spoke to me." I do think getting support is important. And if you can't afford, because not everybody can afford therapy or therapists, there's lots of groups and support groups out there to talk to of other people that have been through or going through what you are or in it right now. I think that's key because there is no book on parenting. There's no book on what you do right or wrong. The only I thing that I would say that a parent could do wrong uh, would be to not accept their kid. They tell you they're different in one way. What does it matter? You want them to be healthy. You want them to be happy. You want to live out being who they are. If you can just get through your own crap, because the issues are more with yourself and your own feelings
Mhm.
than your child's, get through that and just be there for them because they're going to need you more than anybody. And if you don't think that telling your family is, a lot of people think, what's the big deal? Just tell us. But there's so many messages going in their head when they're thinking about it that you can't imagine because they know that people will be kicked out. They won't be accepted. They'll be told to get out of the house right in that moment and they're gone. And that's what they're worried about. But as parents, for me, you just, something might be a little different and it might not be what you're used to, but it's still your kid. And I think your job is still to love them unconditionally.
Yeah, 100%.
Said.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Kathy. This was wonderful.
Welcome.
Yes. Thanks for listening today. Don't forget to subscribe so you can hear our latest episodes as soon as they drop.
If you loved today's episode, share with a friend. Come visit us on Instagram or Facebook. Make sure to give us a follow. We have lots of giveaways. If you want to know more about Kelly and I, read our blogs, find more tips, tools, and resources, check that out at chasingbrighter.com. Thanks.